Hey guys, you should have just finished watching the first episode of season 2 of Man in the High Castle. If you haven't, stop this right now. Go watch it either on IGN or on Amazon, where the entire second season is now, and then come back here and watch this interview because we're going to get into spoilers. Spoilers for just the first episode of season 2. All right, you've been warned. Guys, thank you so much for joining today. And we kick off season 2 with, well, first, let's just get out of the gate. The Man in the High Castle, the title character of the show, is introduced. How did you guys decide, okay, this is the right time? You know, he's such a sort of man of mystery.
Well,
Let's bring him
the
in.
second season is really the expansion of our world and the intensification of our world on every character level. And there was much debate, actually, about possibly introducing him in season 1. But we really wanted to give the audience a chance to settle into orienting to what this alternative history of our own looks like. And so the turn into season 2 is to really start beginning to understand what the ramifications of the films may be, and how that will impact our characters' lives individually.
I'm a big fan of Stephen Root's. I loved seeing him pop up in this role. Again, it's sort of a big build-up to who this is going to be. How did you find Stephen for the role?
It was the casting process on this was very sort of mind-blowing, to be honest, because there were all potential ways of approaching who the Man on Castle may have been, and without getting into great detail, every ethnicity was considered, every gender was considered, but that's what's so dynamic about this show is not only in our internal history, but imagining what the ramifications of that might be. And Stephen Root is a spectacular actor, and when we knew he was available to us, there really wasn't much question except whether we could make his deal.
I'm glad you did. Alexa, let me ask you about doing that scene, because again, it is sort of a big extra reveal. I mean, obviously the movies are there from the very beginning, but seeing this guy with this library, was that, sort of a fun sequence as far as realizing the ramifications again for the mythology of the show, and getting to have this scene with Stephen and where he's kind of the Wizard of Oz revealed?
Extraordinary. I have to say, working with him was such a gift, and just so much fun. We had a really great rapport. Yes, that scene was extraordinary. I mean, she spent the whole first season sort of, searching for answers, and leading up to that moment was kind of a, this paramount, experience for her. And there was no better man, I think, than Stephen. He was extraordinary.
And then Rufus, let me ask you about in this in this premiere, you you get to go home. It's interesting with your character because in a show where we're kind of seeing how everyone is living their life in this different reality, he seems pretty adamant that he's a true believer in what he's doing. But you always wonder, are there any doubts there? Given what he went through last season, the fact that he found out his friend was sort of a traitor, is that kind of just made him even more sure of himself, or is those doubts creeping in at all?
Well, for me, that was always the attraction of the character. Not so much how he shows it. I mean, his friend Wegener, when he came to dinner and spent the day with him in episode 6 of season 1. It's very useful to have him here. When Wegener expressed, remorse, there is a reason that John Smith closes down and doesn't want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And someone who's fine about it, someone who's good with it, someone who has no qualms, doesn't act that way. I believe that John Smith is run on guilt and doubt. I believe that's what powers him. And this pact he's made in order, he believes, to protect his family is a kind of Faustian pact, as it kind of works out that the very thing that he's traded in for to protect his family may be cannibalizing his family. And he's not unaware of that. He's a very, very, very smart man. It's just a matter of how you process your guilt and what it makes you do. Now, Wegener, for example, was someone who just went into that doubt. And I think John Smith is someone who pulled the mask ever tighter to his face for fear of what would happen if he admitted that this thing that he'd signed up to wasn't what he believed it was. And I think that's a very, very strong part of him. And I like to think that will be explored more and more.
Now, let's talk alternate realities. And David, let me start with you as far as we got this big thing happen at the end of season 1. We actually transported there briefly. And now with The Man in the High Castle showing all these different films, it sort of surmised that this could be many different, variations of this world. How much will we sort of delve into that directly as the season continues, and how much might we sneak over to what we surmise is our world?
We delve into it directly and fairly extensively, and to some surprise, I think, for the audience, what and who they'll encounter there. But again, the brilliance of the concept is that it allows us to get exposed to, it's sort of the sliding doors of history, and looking at not only alternative histories of the world we're living in, but potentially alternative histories of ourselves and who we would be in those circumstances. And so in that sense, it's a bit mind-bending, but it's all really speaking to the underlying truths of who we are and the choices we make.
You said something there I have to jump on, which is the fact that, we did get a glimpse, obviously, even last season, of Joe and Frank in these films. Might some other cast members, maybe even people sitting next to you, get to show different versions of themselves?
I'm not at liberty to speak to that.
All right. Figured you'd say that. Alexa, let me ask you about your character, and she sees these movies. Can she get her mind around it, though? It's such a crazy concept, and she obviously hasn't transported there physically. So to her, what do you think as the season begins? What does she think this is? What is it actually depicting?
Oh man, I mean, I think she's so desperately hungry to find out why everything's happened to her, and why her sister's gone, and why this, and why. And she's a bit like a child in that way, in a sense that she's incredibly persistent and tenacious and desperate and curious and open, in a sense. And I think when she meets the man in the high castle, it's like gospel, in a sense, because everything's amounted to this one moment, and so what he says is truth, whether it is or isn't, it is to her in that moment, and that's what propels her forward into the rest of the season. And I don't think she knows exactly what it is, but she knows it's incredibly important, and she knows that she plays a crucial part in it, and she kind of, she dives in. That's who she is.
And then Rufus, for your character, he's, again, you kind of reference, he's very good at compartmentalizing, perhaps. So is he has to get these movies back. That's like part of the mission. Is he giving much thought to what's on them and what it means, or is that just, again, sort of complete the mission, do what's best for me and my family?
No, that's what one of the quandaries for me about this setup, where you ask me questions and stuff, is that I tend to think that those are my secrets, and I think there's a lot of stuff that goes on in his head that the audience doesn't necessarily need to know yet. There are things that I privately think that I don't ask the writers to provide for me. I'll work my own way through it, and I think there's a lot more to what's going on with him than meets the eye. I just want to keep as many doors open as possible about what his ultimate plans are, his ultimate desires, his ultimate doubts. I feel I know what they are. And hopefully what will be picked up is the fact that there's something going on, but you don't need to know what it is. So what's interesting for John Smith is that he's got two different journeys. I like to think of, John Smith as a kind of a living alternate history, that he is actually his own. There is the John Smith in that world, and inside him is the John Smith that he would have been in our world. And I think those two are at conflict. And that's why it's such an interest. And that's the kind of internal dialogue that keeps me going, Yeah. I think I kind of went off piste there slightly with my answer. I think that's what I decided I wanted to talk about.
It was well done. Let me ask about, I'll start with you, David, on the topic of these two characters that Rufus and Alexa play meeting, because, we've seen in the trailer, and there was a clip shown at New York Comic Con that showed, her seeking asylum and them meeting for the first time. So you talk about bringing those characters together, and was it fun for you guys, second year of the show, to have some characters who've never meet finally encounter each other.
Yeah, I mean, there's a division of characters and then a unification of characters, and that I think is exciting to undertake in any series. Not to mention, frankly, it's thrilling to put actors together and get to see what they may do. That in many ways inspires other thoughts of where the characters can go. But I think in the larger sweep of our history, it's interesting just to see what those combinations may create.
Now, Alexa, it's not that hard to guess why she might need to do this, given the fact that she just had to jump out of a car and was shot at when we saw her at the end of the first episode. But can you talk about, it's still a huge deal. It's not like she feels this is probably, I'm guessing, the safe route. Can you talk at all about her decision to seek asylum with the enemy?
Certainly not the safest bet. I think the neutral zone would have been probably
It's a bad sign.
safer, right? I think she's incredibly clever, and I think that she knew that ultimately there were very few choices that she really had. She would be found no matter where she went. There's the Marshall in the neutral zone. There's, the Kempe Tai in the West Coast, and I think she really had no choice. And so it's a survival skill. Whether that pans out for her or not, that remains to be seen. But it's a terrifying choice, and she ultimately has to give away everything she's ever known and everything she's ever been as a human. So she says goodbye to her family and to everything that's familiar and in some way safe, albeit, incredibly unsafe. But she goes into an alternate reality of her own within this world, which is a journey with this one, which is incredible, but terrifying for her. And ultimately, she has to be a chameleon to survive. So she changes.
And Rufus, anything you can say about clearly he's not just taking her at face value. The clip we saw where he's interrogating her and asking about anyone who can identify or talk about her past, and everyone she names as dead. I'm guessing he's going to keep an eye on her. That he's not just going to say, okay, it's all good.
Again, I've got to plead the fifth on this. I mean, that's why, especially when you're doing round-robin interviews, you find that the actors in this end up saying the dullest things. You end up saying things like, you realize why actors say, well, we go on a journey, whatever that means. I have an arc, and that's about as specific as I can get. Again, I refer you to my previous answer. There's some stuff going on in my head, and you're not allowed to know what it is yet.
Let me ask you too, though, just as actors, is it fun and just a funny circumstance where you're on a TV show with co-stars that you never worked with for a year, and then suddenly it's like, oh, now we get to have scenes together?
For me, especially, because I have to say that, for want of creating a kind of using an unlikely phrase, being the head of the SS for me has been quite a lonely job. That if I make any friends in one episode, there's always the chance I'm going to push them off a building in the next, and then I'm on my own again. So actually, to be working with people that I really saw in the read-throughs and then didn't see again for weeks at a time we've had so much fun working together. For me, it's been such a treat and very exciting. It is just like an entirely new world opens up to you.
I was desperate to work with him the first season, and I thought, there's no way. How are they ever going to connect? She'll never be over there. She'll never be in New York. And when that storyline came up, I thought, well, now here we go. It was close your ears. Go on. Thank you. It was such a gift. Working with him is absolutely extraordinary. So yes, okay, you can. Hello. We're back.
She said terrible things.
I'm a little deaf anyway.
She said highly disparaging things. I'm sorry. David, can you speak to sort of overall the sort of approach on this season? It's a second season of a show. You kind of sort of had the learning curve of the first year. So this year, what was your approach as far as the themes and where you wanted to go with the story this year?
I mean, to distill it down, I think what we ended up exploring, and which will be oft referenced, is a literal sort of butterfly effect, and seeing how each of these individual characters plays a meaningful, if not significant, effect on where the greater sweep of history, if not their own individual story, takes them. And I think that speaks explicitly to the world we're in now, where you're always questioning, what can one do?
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me, and you should be checking out more of The Man in High Castle on Amazon right now. Thanks, guys.
But in future, you have to learn to keep your feelings in check. I can't do that, sir. Oh, you can't? to resign, Joe.
You got your film.
Yes. Film of great importance to the Fuhrer. Think about what that means, Joe. Think how proud your father will be.
And we're continuing on with two more cast members from Man in the High Castle. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. You know, this season 2, we just saw the premiere of it. Your character, I feel like, as children, just come on already. I mean, just this guy walks into his store one day and everything goes to hell. Is it just this continuing nightmare at this point for him?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of a nightmare all the way through. Frank walks in and everything goes completely sideways for Chilton. It's just one crisis after another. And Chilton is not exactly a relaxed guy to begin with. So, you know, his stress level is already at 9. So when things go wrong, it just amps him up too.
Yeah.
You know.
And does he, I mean, understandably, he doesn't see a simple way out, but do you think he's trying to figure a way out of it? Or is it just, I have to go along with this right now?
He doesn't understand the implications of what's happened yet.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, as we go through, he begins to learn more about what Frank's been up to. And the underground, you know, resistance side of it comes more into play. And Chilton begins to get an inkling. But for him, Chilton's just trying to keep his, you know, he's trying to mind his own business and stick to his own yoga mat.
Yes.
And just let Frank do what he's doing, but he just gets drawn in more and more by Frank's needing his help or needing his, you know, expertise with whatever, with the artifacts.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, so it's a constant. He tries to get out, but Frank pulls him back in. It's very Pacino.
Meanwhile, you know, we didn't see Ed in the premiere, but we heard about him, and he had confessed to a crime we know he didn't commit. So can you talk about that? I mean, he's stuck in a horrible situation here. It doesn't sound like things are going well if he's confessing to it. So what can you say about where he's at?
Well, that's sort of a through line for this season that we explore. Basically what happens, I mean, we live in a world where it's not great, obviously. I mean, you're subjugated if you are a white American, because the Japanese have a sort of imperial rule. And so what we see, but at least it's safe. Right. If you keep your head down and you do the job that you're assigned, you're alive. So Ed comes from a perspective of like, yeah, this isn't great, but by doing this, by going through with what the Japanese have their plan for you, is that at least you can eat and you aren't killed. And so everything that Frank does pushes Ed further into danger. And he thinks that he's making the ultimate sacrifice for Frank, and that Frank will maybe see the error of his ways by basically throwing himself on the mercy of the Kempeitai. And it doesn't work out for him in that way, and he winds up being in a situation this year that really puts everyone in danger.
And, you know, it's funny because Frank, the thing that binds your characters together, who right now don't even really know each other, I think, is the fact that Frank got them into this. But of course, Ed was already Frank's friend. So how does he feel about Frank at this point? Is he angry at him? Does he understand how this all, you know, turned into the situation it did?
Well, it's a complete mix of emotions how he feels about Frank, because when you think about it, like our show, basically our episodes are like 1 to 2 days. Yeah. So we're only at the beginning of second season, like maybe 2 weeks into this, and our lives have completely changed.
This is all really recent, like what happens between the first and second season. It's all just a continual time frame, so it's not like we have a lot. This is all immediately taking place in our lives, so the adjustments we're making are quick.
Right, and as we shoot the episodes, we have to constantly remind ourselves to the gravity of the situation, because to take in that much information, like your life, you went from a place where you knew your place in society, you were relatively safe, to a place where your rug is completely pulled out from underneath you. All bets are sort of off, and it gets sort of worse as the season goes on. And the effect that has between Frank and Ed is that Ed loves him so much, and we get into that. We explore why that happened. There's a loyalty between them because Frank wound up basically saving Ed's life during an air raid when the Japanese invaded California. And so this really has bonded them, and he's been his only friend. And so the trio of Juliana, Frank, and Ed, and we explore that. We do some flashbacks this year to their early relationship. We really see Jules is gone. She's gone to New York, and now Frank is pulling away from him, and he feels like he's floundering. And he also there's some anger. He was willing to lay down his life for Frank, and now Frank is basically almost discarding him, and it breaks his heart and makes him angry.
Both your characters also, what really sticks out to me about your characters is that they were two guys that were sort of trying to get by in this difficult world, doing jobs, sort of living their life, maybe not happy with how everything was, but they weren't resistance members. They weren't sort of actively working against it. So is it for both of them, starting with Chilton, is it just, kind of changing their perspective to suddenly be so caught up in something that they'd, kind of kept at arm's length up till now?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm here for you.
I appreciate it. Actually, could you just hold it for me at a jaunty angle? For Chilton, he's not only, he's definitely, it's just as DJ was saying, he's trying to not only survive in this world in which, the whites have been colonialized completely and been taken over and they're completely disenfranchised. He's not only trying to survive, he's trying to achieve. He's constantly striving. He is the definition of upward striving, constantly needing more and more and more. And what he's craving, of course, is recognition, love, acknowledgement of his value as a human being. I mean, it's such a primary part of who Chilton is that it's the craving for recognition, affection, to be desired, to be seen as good enough. And he lives in a world in which that's impossible. And it speaks to that racism, how racism can be have devastating effects on all aspects of society, and part of that is constantly wanting to ingratiate yourself to your oppressors.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sad. There's such a sadness in that.
Yeah, very sad. And it speaks to, and of course, what the show is doing is holding a mirror up to our own society and saying, but it's a funhouse mirror where it's in complete reverse. And I think that's one of the truly wonderful things about the show is that it shows a society in which it addresses the issues that are so key for us now, if we just look at the world around us. But it does so in this way that's completely refracted through this prism of alternate reality. So it gives it this whole new spin on it. So Chilton wants very much to be loved and cherished and belong. And he not only is trying to get by, he's trying to better himself and constantly improve his lot and improve his status. In the Japanese world, status is everything. Right. It's your place in society. It's called being placed. Mm-hmm. And he just wants to get placed to such an extent that he's seen as a valuable person and man. And that continues throughout the season for Chilton. And what Frank and Ed have done, and we also see with Frank and Ed, with Chilton and Ed, when we meet, which I guess we can say we do meet in this, we meet. And you see then that worldview versus Ed's worldview come together and begin to sort of affect each other. They begin to affect each other in ways that are really interesting.
I mean, I don't think it's an extreme spoiler to say that we wind up. I love how that you're now holding it for me.
Well,
I don't think it's an extreme spoiler to say that we wind up through a series of circumstances. We wind up living together, and what it does, there are certain scenes that provide some much needed levity to the show. We have an odd couple sort of dynamic. We're completely opposites. And then they wind up finding some sort of common ground. I mean, it's basically out of necessity. But there's something kind of beautiful and pure about that relationship. And then as Frank starts to go further into the resistance, there's some scenes where he's a little short and abusive with Chilton, and Ed is like, you can't do that.
Yeah, it's really touching. No one's ever stuck up for Chilton before, and Ed does. And also, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt. That was beautiful. But what's great about the humor that DJ just mentioned is, I think both of us try to bring. I know definitely for people, Chilton is a humorous character, or has aspects of humor about him. But I know that DJ and I both feel the same way about this. Is that if something is funny, and some of our scenes I think do have humor to them, but that it be completely earned and completely grounded in a real deep need. That because this show is not a show, it needs humor. Humor is great, and we want to bring it to.
Where it rains people's ashes.
Right. Yeah, we want to bring that humor, but we also want to make sure it's not like winking at the audience and putting on a clown show. It's like very grounded and very like real. So I think that's been a line that you and I have tried to walk
I'm
with
a
our
serious
character.
actor now. I don't do that.
Yeah. Well, Ed's serious. I was trained as a clown, actually.
Were you really?
No.
That would be awesome. I'd
No.
like you better.
No. I had one day of clown training in grad school, and it was a nightmare.
Can incorporate that maybe one day in Man in the High Castle. Both your characters, are pretty right now divorced from the film aspect and sort of that knowledge of what it could all mean. Can you say what you think they would make of that? Would any of these characters you think it would just blow their mind? To process what that possibility of something out
It would
there.
blow Ed's mind. Ed's a conspiracy theorist. I mean, that's his whole thing. Yeah, it would. I think it would be like right now, without being eased into it. Like if we found out that, I love this. If we found out that there were really aliens, like that sort of like. I think Pandora's box of what people like, what they would start thinking. I think that would be the same way for Ed. He still doesn't at the end of season 2 really know about the films. I don't think.
Right.
I don't know because they wrote something that I
know.
can't say that we rejected. We wrote something that we didn't wind up filming.
Okay.
Well,
That's
just-
great.
there was-
What else happened?
Well, you can't let Ed know about the films. He just can't know about them until he's like, you'd have to sit him down, put a blanket on his legs. You'd have to tell him like like when there's a cat that somebody's watching, like somebody's watching your cat and the cat dies the first day. You have to do that whole like, your cat got out today, but we're getting them back. We got your cat, but he's looking a little peaked. But the cat's already been dead for 2 weeks. But you have to,
Did you have an experience with a cat in your life that you want to talk about?
No, but you know what I'm talking about. Like you have to sort of ease people into things. You can't just.
Be gentle. Be gentle.
that's
Not.
You can just tell shit.
You don't rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Well, yeah, and for Chilton, it's the same. If he knew, Chilton does not know about the films, and if he did, his mind would literally. I mean, I think we're all going to eventually be there. Who knows the way it's going to be taken, but part of the joy of watching the show is seeing how these characters react to the notion of a completely alternate world.
Right.
That they may or may not have access to, and to see how that would affect them. Yeah, I think it would blow certainly Chilton's mind and Ed's minds, minds, like you have many of them.
But one thing that's really cool about the films this year is that we get into there's
Hold your own mic.
where we get in from. I'm used to being interviewed on the carpet, dude. Anyway, this year we get into where the films come from. Yeah. And it's really clever what the writers have done with that. I think the audience is really going to like it, and it makes sense. It takes it away from sort of the realm of mysticism, and we get there is a little bit of, passing between realities, and that is sort of mystic, but. We realize that there's no sort of oracle in charge. There's no puppet master happening in this. Yeah, that's where I wanted to end that.
Well, I gave you the mic for that.
I know.
I'm taking the mic
I
back.
realized that my watch was making a bunch of noise.
Yeah, can you quiet your watch, please?
It's unacceptable.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'll let you take back over the interview
Just
now.
lastly, I was going to ask about, because we just saw in the premiere episode meeting Stephen Root as the Man in the High Castle. Again, right now, that is not a character I imagine you guys are going to in episode 2 or 3 be meeting up with, but is that something where, would you love eventually just as actors to get the chance to sort of see those worlds collide?
Oh, hells to the yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't see Steven until we had our final dinner. I think you were already going, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. I didn't actually see him there because
Yeah.
I was gone. I was out.
Of course, we'd like to get into that. We don't even know what's going to happen next. Like everyone's in sort of a limbo situation, with danger all around all of us. So we have no idea what's going to happen. I think I hope we don't wind up in the neutral zone because it's far away. It's hard to get there in traffic.
Right.
It is a nightmare to get to.
DJ's preferences for plot lines are based on the convenience of the set locations.
Understandable.
That's not 100% true, but it's hard to get there.
Well, it is. It's
important-
hard to get there.
It's an important factor.
I, for one, am willing to travel great distances to perform because I'm a natural performer.
I think they saw us doing this in real life, and this is what they wrote.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank
to
you.
see more of this kind of bantering, please go right now to Amazon. You can check out all of Man in the High Castle Season 2. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Frank. Have you reconsidered? Reconsidered? Yeah, my offer to place more authentic Americana with my Japanese clientele.
Hey, listen, you've got a problem. We both do.
What sort of problem?
A friend of mine's been arrested for shooting the Crown Prince. They forced him to confess.
So what does that have to do with me?
He was caught with a gun. The shells in the chamber were yours.